We've all imagined what it would be like to live in a zombie movie, and you know what? It's just such an interesting topic to think and talk about. So I've decided to list everything people get wrong about zombie movies. Starting with one people overlook, brain myth. First up, that whole brain craving thing. Yeah, mostly garbage. The idea that zombies specifically hunt for brains comes from Return of the Living Dead back in 1985, where the zombies literally moan, "brains?" because it supposedly relieves the pain of being dead. But go back to the classics, like Night of the Living Dead, or check out The Walking Dead, and you'll see zombies chomping on whatever flesh they can grab. Arms, legs, guts. They're not picky. Even in games like Left 4 Dead, the infected just attack everything in sight without any special brain preference. The truth is, traditional zombie lore never specified brains at all. The Haitian voodoo origins that inspired early zombie stories were about enslaved people, not cannibals targeting your noggin specifically. Modern depictions lean into general flesh eating, because that's what actually makes biological sense if we're talking about mindless hunger. Return of the Living Dead was basically a horror comedy that turned a joke into pop culture gospel, and now everyone thinks zombies are running around like brainy vampires. But here's where it gets interesting. The brain myth actually reveals something deeper about how zombie evolution works across media. When Return of the Living Dead's writer Dan O'Bannon created talking, brain-craving zombies, he was deliberately breaking from Romero's rules to avoid copyright issues. The studio didn't own rights to traditional zombies, so they invented new mechanics where zombies could run, talk, and specifically explain their craving. The misconception persists because it's memetically perfect. Brains became shorthand for zombies in pop culture the same way "it's alive" means Frankenstein. It's catchier than random flesh consumption, so it stuck. But the deeper we go, the more the myths pile up. Like speed debate. Slow zombies came from the idea that rotting corpses can't exactly coordinate their muscles well. Romero's zombies were radiation reanimated corpses that moved like walking decay. But if you're dealing with infected living people, like in 28 Days Later, they're not actually undead. They're just rabid and pumped full of rage virus. Their muscles still work, their blood still flows. So why wouldn't they run? The slow versus fast debate is really just about whether you're dealing with corpses or infected hosts, and both have appeared in the media for decades now. Dying Light even weaponized this by making zombies slow during the day but terrifyingly fast and much more deadly at night. Now here's where the speed myth connects to something way more dangerous. The entire debate about fast versus slow zombies is actually hiding a more fundamental question. Are we dealing with the undead or the infected? Survival shift. Undead zombies, the Romero classics, are reanimated corpses. No heartbeat, no breathing, no metabolism. They move slowly because rigor mortis, decomposition, and lack of oxygen to muscles makes coordination nearly impossible. But they also don't feel pain, don't need rest, and can technically function until their bodies physically fall apart. You can shoot one in the chest 50 times and it keeps coming because there's nothing vital to damage except the brainstem that's somehow still firing off movement commands. Infected zombies, the 28 Days Later rage monsters, are living humans with functioning biology that's been hijacked by a pathogen. They sprint because their muscles, cardiovascular system, and nervous system still work normally. They're just running on pure adrenaline and aggression with the rational brain shut off. But this means they have weaknesses undead don't have. They need to breathe, so drowning works. They need food and water, so they eventually starve. They can die from blood loss, infection from wounds, or just exhaustion from sprinting for hours. The Last of Us brilliantly splits this difference with its cordyceps infection. Early stage runners are still mostly human biology running on fungal autopilot, so they're fast and dangerous. But as the infection progresses, the fungus literally replaces human tissue with its own growths. Clickers are slower but armored in fungal plates that make headshots nearly impossible. Bloaters are walking fungal fortresses that have been gestating for years, barely mobile, but incredibly tough. The game's entire combat system is built around recognizing which stage you're fighting and adjusting tactics accordingly. World War Z, the novel, actually addressed this scientifically. The book's zombies were undead, and author Max Brooks calculated that their slow speed was actually an advantage for spreading globally. Fast zombies burn through local populations quickly, but then have nothing left to eat. Slow zombies create a steady, inevitable wave that pushes survivors ahead of them, spreading panic and refugees who carry infection to new areas. The movie threw this out for spectacle, making them fast enough to create CGI tidal waves of bodies. But it sacrificed the terrifying mathematics of a slow, patient apocalypse. So when people argue about fast versus slow, they're really arguing about biology versus supernatural horror. Fast infected are scarier in the moment, pure nightmare fuel when you're being chased. Slow undead are existentially scarier because they represent an unstoppable force force that will eventually reach you no matter where you hide. Both are valid horror approaches, but mixing them up means preparing for the wrong threat. If you thought Speed Confusion was bad, wait until you hear about the name game, genre blindness. This creates what fans call genre blindness, where characters spend weeks figuring out basic zombie rules that any horror fan knows by heart. Headshots kill them, bites infect you, they're attracted to noise, all stuff we learned from pop culture. But in these shows, survivors act like they're encountering brand new monsters. Shaun of the Dead brilliantly mocked this by having characters casually reference zombie movies while fighting actual zombies, showing how ridiculous it is to pretend the genre doesn't exist. The excuse is that it builds realism and suspense, but really it just delays characters from acting smart and forces them through predictable learning curves that frustrate audiences. Okay, we've covered the fun myths. Brains, speed, the Z word. Those are the misconceptions that fuel Reddit arguments and bar debates. But starting right now, we're entering the danger zone. The next 4 lies are the ones that would actually get you killed because they fundamentally misrepresent how zombie physics, combat, and social collapse actually work. Zombie decay. Now let's talk about zombie durability, because this one's physically impossible and everyone ignores it. Movies love showing zombies that have been wandering around for months or even years, still moaning and biting like they're fresh off the assembly line. The Walking Dead has zombies active across multiple seasons spanning years. But in reality, a human corpse exposed to the elements would fall apart in weeks, maybe months tops. Bacteria would eat the tissue, weather would break down the skin, and without a functioning immune system or cellular repair, they'd be piles of bones before the first winter ended. Some shows try to acknowledge this. 28 Weeks Later mentioned that the infected starved to death after a few months. The Last of Us actually stages its infected, showing how they evolve from runners to clickers to bloaters as the fungus takes over and armors them up. State of Decay, a zombie survival game, even built decay mechanics where zombies gradually weaken over time. But most media just handwaves it because a zombie apocalypse that solves itself in 6 months doesn't make for a long-running TV series. The science says nature would win pretty quickly, but drama says the dead stay threatening forever. The decay timeline is about the entire ecosystem turning against them. Insects would be feasting on exposed flesh within hours. Maggots would colonize wounds and eye sockets. Carrion birds would peck at the slow-moving buffet. Wild animals, from feral dogs to wolves to bears, would learn quickly that zombies can't fight back effectively against pack tactics or large predators. Within months, nature would be doing most of your zombie clearing work for free. But here's the catch that the media never addresses. What happens in different climates? The Walking Dead mostly takes place in temperate zones where decay happens at a moderate pace. But imagine zombies in the Arizona desert. Direct sunlight and 100-degree heat would mummify exposed flesh within weeks, potentially preserving them longer but making them brittle and easier to shatter. In tropical environments, the heat and humidity would accelerate decomposition exponentially. And then there's winter. Zombies in northern climates would freeze solid during cold months, becoming ice statues until spring thaw. The Walking Dead hinted at this when survivors talked about winter being easier, but never fully explored the implications. Canada, Russia, Scandinavia, these places would see zombie threats completely neutralized for half the year. You could literally walk up to frozen zombies and shatter them with a hammer. But the spring thaw would reanimate thousands at once. Some media tried to address this. The novel World War Z included a chapter about zombies walking across the ocean floor because they don't need to breathe, accumulating in underwater hordes before washing up on beaches. It also covered frozen zombies in the Arctic that remained threats for years. The Zombie Survival Guide, also by Max Brooks, calculated that zombies in extreme cold could remain preserved indefinitely, creating permanent dead zones in polar regions. But most shows and movies ignore climate entirely because it would solve the apocalypse too quickly. The real question is whether the zombie pathogen itself provides any preservation. If it's a virus keeping cells minimally active, maybe that slows rot slightly. If it's fungal like The Last of Us, the fungus might literally hold the body together with its network of fibers the way it does with dead insects in nature. If it's supernatural, all bets are off and zombies could walk until the heat death of the universe. But anything trying to be scientifically plausible has to admit that unmodified human corpses have an expiration date measured in weeks, not years. Weapon reality. The weapons misconception might be the most dangerous if this ever happened for real. Movies make killing zombies look effortless. One stab to the head with a screwdriver and boom, done. Michonne in The Walking Dead swings her katana katana and skulls split like watermelons. Rick Grimes casually stabs zombies through the eye socket with a knife, but human skulls are incredibly thick and tough. Forensic studies show it takes serious force to penetrate bone, and most improvised weapons would either bounce off or get stuck. You'd exhaust yourself after a few kills, and God help you if you miss. Resident Evil gets closer to reality with its boss zombies that tank multiple headshots before going down. The Last of Us put armored plating on clicker heads from the fungal growth, forcing players to use precious ammo or explosives. In real life, blunt weapons would probably just concuss a zombie without destroying the brain, and edged weapons would dull fast on bone. The whole aim for the head strategy works in theory, but execution is way harder than movies admit. VR zombie games are teaching people this the hard way, where actually landing headshots under pressure is brutal. The weapons problem extends beyond just penetrating skulls. There's the exhaustion factor that movies completely ignore. A katana like Michonne's looks elegant slicing through zombie necks, but real swordsmanship is incredibly tiring. Historical records show that medieval soldiers in battle could only fight intensely for 15 to 20 minutes before exhaustion set in, and they were trained athletes. An average survivor swinging a baseball bat or machete would be gasping for air after a few kills, arms burning, hands blistering. Then there's weapon maintenance, something almost no zombie media addresses. Realistically, blades dull after hitting bone repeatedly, metal bats dent and crack, wooden handles splinter from impact stress, guns need cleaning after firing or they jam, and ammunition has a shelf life that degrades over years. Some games tried to incorporate this. Dead Island had weapon durability systems where your machete would eventually break from overuse, forcing you to find workbenches for repairs. State of Decay 2 made you manage facility mods for weapon crafting and maintenance, but even these systems are generous compared to reality. A real improvised weapon like a nail-studded board would fall apart after a dozen swings. A fire axe would get stuck in a skull and require leverage to extract, leaving you vulnerable during zombie attack number 2. The melee versus range debate is also more complex than media shows. Guns solve the skull penetration problem with sheer force, but they're loud, attracting more zombies, and ammo runs out. Bows and crossbows are quiet and reusable, but require immense skill to land headshots, especially on moving targets. Daryl makes it look easy, but bow hunting requires immense skill and practice even on stationary targets. Trying to headshot a lurching zombie while panicking? Your bolt is flying wild. Melee keeps you silent and doesn't run out, but puts you in bite range every single time. One slip, one stumble, one zombie you didn't see grabbing your ankle, and you're infected. The risk-reward calculation means ranged is better when you have ammo. Melee is suicidal desperation. But movies show survivors casually wading into zombie hordes with knives, like it's a reasonable tactic. It's not. It's how you die quickly while looking cool. The zombies themselves add variables most people don't consider. Fresh zombies still have muscle tension and can grip hard. A zombie grabbing your weapon arm isn't letting go without serious damage to its hand, which it doesn't care about. Skeletal zombies are actually more dangerous with melee because there's less flesh to slow your blade, meaning you might swing through a skull and into your own leg on follow-through. Armored zombies like riot gear cops or construction workers with hard hats make headshots nearly impossible without heavy weapons. Historical weapons would actually be better than modern improvised gear. A proper warhammer or mace is designed to crush skulls through helmets, which is basically what you need. A spear keeps distance while allowing thrusting attacks to the eye socket. Roman gladius swords were short and stabby, perfect for close quarters brain destruction, but good luck finding a functioning medieval armory in suburban America. You're stuck with sporting goods store baseball bats and kitchen knives, tools never designed for zombie combat. If you are enjoying the video so far and want to discuss or get mad at me for my rankings, join my Discord, link in the description. Military collapse. If you're thinking the military would save us, think again. One of the biggest myths is that organized armed forces would crumble immediately, and while that's dramatic, it's probably overblown. World War Z, the book, actually detailed exactly how modern military tactics failed, like the Battle of Yonkers, where soldiers trained for center mass shots couldn't adapt to headshots fast enough. Fear the Walking Dead showed the collapse in slow motion, with National Guard units abandoning posts as society fell apart. But realistically, militaries have adapted to way weirder threats throughout history. The problem in zombie fiction is always panic and morale collapse, not capability. Soldiers get overwhelmed because they hesitate, or commanders make bad calls, or infected troops turn inside the ranks like in Operation Undead. But if militaries actually trained for headshot protocols and set up proper fire lines, zombies wouldn't stand much chance against coordinated firepower. Kingdom, a Korean period drama with zombies, actually showed a feudal military adapting successfully with spear formations targeting heads. The instant collapse is a plot device to isolate survivors, not a realistic outcome. Zombies win in fiction because we need them for the story, not because armed forces are incompetent. Here's one that drives scientists crazy. Let me connect something that should be obvious, but isn't. If zombies decay in months, and militaries could adapt tactics, and weapons barely work for individuals, then why does every zombie story show humanity losing catastrophically? Why are we always on the edge of extinction? Because the next 3 misconceptions reveal that zombie fiction is structurally designed to make us fail. These aren't just lies about zombies. They're lies about human nature that explain why every apocalypse story follows the same pattern of collapse. Dark truths, the cure myth, the infighting inevitability, and the forgotten origins of zombie folklore all serve the same narrative purpose, removing hope and forcing survivors into impossible choices. And once you see the pattern, you realize zombie stories aren't about surviving monsters. They're about watching ourselves become monsters. Let's start with the false hope that drives half of all zombie plots, the obsession with finding a cure. So many zombie stories revolve around survivors desperately seeking out labs or scientists to cook up a vaccine and save humanity. I Am Legend had Will Smith working on a cure for years. The Last of Us built its entire emotional core around Ellie being immune and potentially holding the key. Sounds noble, right? Except most survivors aren't virologists or microbiologists. They're teachers, mechanics, random people who can barely keep themselves fed. Robert Kirkman said it best when he confirmed there's no cure coming in The Walking Dead because none of these people have the expertise or resources to create one. Real pandemic responses take teams of researchers in functioning labs with stable power and supply chains. In an apocalypse, you're lucky if you find clean water. True, the cure quest is a false hope that diverts energy from actual survival. Zombieland 2 played with immunity as a gag, but even then, it was useless without infrastructure to develop treatments. The smartest survivors stop chasing miracle solutions and focus on building sustainable communities. But that doesn't make for exciting hero journeys. So media keeps pushing the cure myth. The cure obsession also creates a dangerous leadership dynamic in survivor groups. In The Walking Dead, when Eugene claimed to know a cure and convinced everyone to trek to Washington, D.C., he was lying, but people followed him because hope is intoxicating. Entire communities have been led to their deaths in zombie media by charlatans promising vaccines or government safe zones that don't exist. It's basically the apocalypse version of a cargo cult waiting for salvation from the sky while doing nothing practical for survival. I Am Legend explored this from the opposite angle. Robert Neville actually was a scientist, actually had the training and equipment to work on a cure. But even he, with a fully stocked lab and years of research, only made incremental progress while slowly going insane from isolation. The film version ended with him creating a cure through his own sacrifice. Classic Hollywood hope. But the book's original ending, which the movie's alternate cut restored, revealed something darker. The infected had evolved into a new society that saw Neville as the monster. There was no curing them because they weren't diseased, they were different now. The Last of Us deconstructed the cure myth brutally in its first season finale. Ellie was immune, truly held the potential for a vaccine, but creating it would kill her, and Joel chose her life over humanity's slim chance at salvation. The show asked whether sacrificing a child for a maybe cure created by a ragtag group of survivors with spotty electricity was even ethical. It presented the hope for a cure as the villain's motivation, showing how that obsession can justify any atrocity. Realistically, vaccine development takes years of trials, manufacturing infrastructure, and distribution networks. Even if someone created a working zombie vaccine in an apocalypse, how do you produce billions of doses without factories? How do you distribute them without transportation infrastructure? How do you convince paranoid survivors to take injections from strangers? The logistics alone make the cure quest pointless for anyone who isn't part of a functioning government with resources. But the media keeps pushing it because survive and rebuild doesn't have the same heroic ring as save the world, human infighting. Now let's get real about human nature, because this misconception actually reflects reality. People love to complain that infighting among survivors is unrealistic or avoidable, that humans would band together against a common enemy. But every study of human behavior under scarcity and stress says the opposite. The Walking Dead didn't become a show about zombies. It became a show about humans being absolute monsters to each other. Factions warred over resources, leaders like the governor and Negan terrorized communities, and cannibals like Terminus literally barbecued people. This isn't bad writing. It's Lord of the Flies on steroids. History is packed with examples of societies collapsing into violence when rules break down. The Whisperers in The Walking Dead took it further by wearing zombie skin and rejecting humanity entirely. Daybreak showed teen factions forming and fracturing. The whole humans are the real monsters theme works because it's backed by psychology and history. Scarcity breeds conflict, trust is fragile, and when you remove law enforcement and social social contracts, people revert to survival instincts that aren't pretty. Zombie stories that skip this are the unrealistic ones, not the ones drowning in betrayal and brutality. The infighting gets even darker when you consider that zombie apocalypses don't just reveal human evil, they incentivize it. Resource scarcity makes cruelty logical. If your group has 10 people and food for 5, either 5 people leave to die, or you take resources from another group by force. There's no moral option, only degrees of horrible. The Walking Dead's Terminus group started as good people offering sanctuary, but after being raided and brutalized, they literally became cannibals who lured in survivors as livestock. Trauma created monsters. Fear the Walking Dead showed this progression in real time during its early seasons. Strand started as a selfish conman, but became a brutal warlord running a survivor colony through fear and manipulation. Victor's arc demonstrated that apocalypse leadership rewards sociopathy. The people who thrive are the ones willing to make ruthless calls, sacrifice others, and suppress empathy. Democracy and consensus building get you killed when a horde is approaching, and someone needs to decide who gets left behind. Psychology explains why cooperation fails. Even when working together helps everyone, betraying your group to save yourself is constantly rewarded in these scenarios. In zombie settings, betraying your group to save yourself is constantly rewarded. The governor in The Walking Dead survived by being willing to kill anyone who threatened his power. Rick's group survived by being willing to murder other survivors preemptively if they seemed dangerous. The nice guys died in season 1. There's also the trust paradox. You need other people to survive. Groups are stronger than individuals. But every person you let into your group is a potential betrayer, a mouth to feed, a security risk. The optimal strategy is small, tight-knit groups of people with personal bonds, which is why most survivor communities in fiction are either tiny families or large authoritarian structures. The middle ground of democratic communities gets wiped out because they're too trusting to new members and too divided internally to act decisively. Real-world disaster psychology backs this up. Studies of hurricane survivors, earthquake victims, and wartime populations show that prosocial behavior spikes initially but declines as crises extend. After weeks of suffering, people start hoarding, forming hostile in-groups, and treating outsiders as threats. The difference with zombies is there's no end date, no government relief coming. It's a permanent crisis, which means permanent tribalism and conflict. The Walking Dead wasn't exaggerating human darkness. It was extrapolating inevitable outcomes, forgotten origins. One misconception people don't even realize they have is thinking zombies are a modern Hollywood invention. Nope, the roots go way deeper into folklore and colonial horror. Haitian voodoo tradition talked about zombies as enslaved people brought back through toxins like tetrodotoxin, controlled by Bokors for labor. White Zombie in 1932 tapped into this, showing zombies as mindless servants, not flesh-eating monsters. The modern viral zombie didn't show up until Romero's Night of the Living Dead in 1968, which stripped away the voodoo angle and replaced it with radiation and cannibalism. This shift erased the cultural and historical context of zombies as metaphors for slavery and oppression. Kingdom blended this back in by setting zombies in feudal Korea, connecting them to class struggles. iZombie played with zombie identity in modern Seattle, but most blockbuster zombie media ignores the folklore entirely in favor of viral outbreaks or fungal infections, treating zombies as generic monsters without acknowledging where they came from. The Haitian connection includes real documented cases like Clervius Narcisse, who was allegedly zombified and later recovered. Recognizing these roots enriches the genre beyond just apocalypse thrills, and reminds us that zombie horror was born from real human trauma. The voodoo origins also explain why modern zombie media is so obsessed with contagion and infection. The original Haitian zombies weren't contagious. A Bokor controlled them through poison and psychological manipulation, and if you weren't targeted, you were safe. But that model doesn't create apocalypses. You need viral spread mechanics for true catastrophic collapse, which is why every modern zombie origin involves bites, blood, or airborne pathogens that turn the undead into exponentially growing threats. Romero's Night of the Living Dead was deliberately vague about origins, showing radiation from a Venus probe as a possible cause, but never confirming anything. That ambiguity allowed the zombies to feel like a force of nature rather than a solvable problem. But as zombie media exploded, creators wanted to explain their monsters scientifically. 28 Days Later used a rage virus created by animal rights activists releasing infected chimps. Resident Evil went full mad science with bioweapons developed by evil corporations. The Walking Dead proposed that everyone is already infected, and death simply activates the pathogen. The Last of Us chose cordyceps fungus, inspired by real parasitic fungi that hijack ant brains in nature. The game's intro shows a 1968 talk show where a scientist warns that if fungi could survive human body temperatures, they could theoretically control us. The game extrapolated this into human infection with horrifying stages: runners, stalkers, clickers, bloaters. But here's what The Last of Us gets wrong according to actual mycologists. Cordyceps is not a single fungus, but a genus of over 400 species, each adapted to specific hosts. The ant-controlling species can't even infect other insects, let alone mammals. Human body temperature is specifically prohibitive to most fungi, which is why fungal infections in humans are usually skin deep or affect immunocompromised patients. A fungus sophisticated enough to control human motor functions while keeping the body ambulatory would require evolution that makes the leap from ants to humans less plausible than supernatural resurrection. The show's creators acknowledged this, saying they embraced the implausibility because it was fresh. Fungal zombies hadn't been done to death like viral ones, and the visual horror of mushrooms erupting from skulls, characters seeing fungal tendrils connecting infected, and the environmental storytelling of fungal overgrowth consuming cities created an aesthetic no virus could match. It was about drama and uniqueness over scientific accuracy, which is fine for fiction, but it means The Last of Us's zombies are just as fantastical as Romero's radiation corpses. This pattern of origin shifting reveals audience evolution. Each era's zombie origins reflect what that generation finds terrifying. We fear pandemics and ecological collapse, so we get fungi and engineered pathogens. Our grandparents feared nuclear annihilation, so they got radiation zombies. The Haitian roots get lost in this evolution, but they matter because they frame zombies as metaphors rather than literal threats. Voodoo zombies represented colonial fear of slave uprisings and the horror of enslavement stripping away personhood. Modern zombies represent whatever we're currently afraid of: consumerism in Dawn of the Dead's Mall, disease in 28 Days Later, post-9/11 bioterror fears, environmental collapse in The Last of Us. Understanding where zombies came from helps decode what they mean now. And finally, let's kill the idea that gore is what makes zombie stories scary. Sure, Dawn of the Dead's 2004 remake was a blood-soaked spectacle, and The Last of Us doesn't shy away from ripping throats out on screen, but the truly terrifying zombie media isn't about the splatter, it's about what the zombies represent. Night of the Living Dead was scary because it showed society collapsing and humans trapped with nowhere to go, not because of gut-munching close-ups. In the Flesh was a British show that barely showed gore but explored zombies reintegrating into society and facing prejudice, which was haunting in a completely different way. Gore Worship. Pontypool did psychological zombie horror through a radio station where the infection spread through language itself, no visuals needed. Gore is a tool, not the foundation. Excessive violence can even desensitize audiences or cover up weak storytelling. The best zombie fiction uses gore sparingly to punctuate moments of horror while building tension through isolation, moral collapse, and the slow realization that the dead rising is just the start of humanity's problems. The Last of Us balanced brutal kills with emotional character beats and won awards for it. When zombie media leans too hard on splatter, it becomes empty violence. When it uses the undead as a mirror for societal rot, corruption, and our worst instincts, that's when it becomes unforgettable. Every single misconception is a deliberate narrative tool designed to strip away the comfortable lies we tell ourselves about civilization, morality, and human nature. Zombie fiction succeeds not because it shows us scary monsters, but because it forces us to confront what we become when the monsters arrive. The undead are just the catalyst. We're the reaction. And the reason these stories resonate across generations is because deep down, we suspect they're right about us. If you enjoyed this video and want to see the 7 levels of global collapse, click the video on the screen.